Damn, what is up, my internet friends? Well, due to the extenuating circumstances of these times, it seems like a good excuse to break format a little bit and just make a video with potentially some practical use value. Today I'm just gonna be riding my bike around and foraging various wild greens, and then I'll go home and make pesto out of them. This is something that I normally do every year because it's delicious and nutritious and free. And maybe some of you might find this interesting or useful. And so I'll go through how to identify the plants. Although I should say that you'll also want to maybe check a secondary information source just to be 100% sure that you have a positive ID on the greens that you're picking. And I'll talk about that later on and give you some more resources for plant identification. And yeah, I'll talk about harvesting them and what to do to process them into delicious pesto. Okay, the first green that I'm gonna pick today is this stinging nettles. What's the Latin name for that? Oh yeah, Urtica dioica. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, but just for reference, in case you want to make sure that we're talking about exactly the same plant. These nettles are really young right now. It's very early in the season. They're gonna very soon grow really tall. I'm in like a field of them, basically. They're all over the place here. So I'm gonna pick some from these dense clusters to effectively thin them out, because that way we're not worried about over picking them, over harvesting them. The patch will stay sustainable, and even if I'm thinning out these dense clusters, then it'll give the ones around the ones that I pick even more room to grow, which might even be helpful. And then I'll keep coming back throughout the spring to pick more. I like to use a pair of scissors to cut them. You can also just pluck them off with your hands, and I just put them in a plastic shopping bag. And yes, they do sting you, and a lot of people wear gloves to harvest them. So I just pick them up real gingerly with the pads of my fingers, and when I do that, sometimes they don't really sting at all, or maybe they sting me a little bit, but the sting's nothing to worry about. It just smarts for a little while and it goes away. Tingles for a little while. Oh yeah, and I just clip off the tops of them, and I leave, you know, the base of the plant, and it can continue to grow. Like this whole top section is nice and will be nice and tender. Also, nettles are like insanely nutritious. They're like loaded with vitamin C and I think A and maybe some other ones. Maybe I should go back and check. But they also have one of the highest protein content for any green vegetable. They're supposedly also have some compounds in them that are really helpful for allergies like hay fever. That component of it, that benefit, is you have to eat the nettles, which is what we're going to be doing for the allergy benefit to work. I'm going to go around and just harvest a little bit from each little cluster to spread out the impact. The other thing about this activity is that it's one of the most calming and peaceful things you can do. You're outside, you got, you know, like a repetitive kind of manual task that's engaging to the senses. It's just real tranquilizing. And you're getting food while you're doing it, which, you know, is like kind of a reassuring feeling. Alright, so I got a good sized bag of stinging nettle greens. For quantity, I usually try to just gather more than I think I need, because once you blend it up, the volume is going to reduce a lot. My fingers are a little bit tingly from the sting, and you might be wondering, how are we going to eat this stinging nettles? If it stings you, won't it sting your mouth? Well, if you did try to eat these just raw and unprocessed here and now, it would sting you up, but we're gonna easily take care of that sting later on when we make the pesto, and I'll show you how. Okay, so the next plant I'm going to be picking is growing in here among the nettles, and it's this guy. It is called garlic mustard. It's a member of the Brassica family, so it's related to mustard and kale and broccoli. And there's archaeological evidence that it is one of the oldest spices used in Europe, and European settlers brought it to North America in the 1800s as a food crop, and then it naturalized and it spread all over North America, and it's considered an invasive now because it just kind of takes over, and our herbivores don't really like to eat it. So we don't have to worry about picking lots of it because we're not going to wipe it out. And it tastes garlicky. It's got that pungent flavor that, you know, feels like it's going up in your sinuses and doing something. And you can even dig up the root, and here we go. There's the root, and you know, it's can be used kind of like horseradish. You know, horseradish is in the same family. It's a brassica, and it just has a, you know, they both have that spicy, pungent quality to them, but it's in the greens and it's in the root. And because of it being such a kind of like pernicious plant, or I should say just like pervasive, I don't know if that's the right word, it grows really readily, it spreads really easily, so I don't feel any qualms about uprooting a few species, because I probably wouldn't be able to, you know, wipe it out in an area if I tried. Oh, I should mention that I have heard tale secondhand of someone having like an adverse mouth and throat reaction after eating a lot of garlic mustard raw. Wasn't anything serious, but maybe that's something to keep an eye out for. I've eaten lots of it. In fact, I'll often make pesto out of straight up garlic mustard, and I've never had any problem. You know, I've known a lot of other people also to eat plenty of this stuff without any problem, but you know, just a potential warning. So here's another green that I'm gonna pick, and it's some species of cress, and I'm not sure exactly which species it is, but I'm familiar with the sort of, you know, group of cresses enough to know that it's one of them. I know it's in the Brassica family, and that it's not going to be poisonous, and if I eat it, it has this brassica-y, and also like pungent, kind of spicy flavor that's different from the garlic mustard, but you know, still yeah, pungent. And if I could zoom in enough on these flowers, you can see that they have 4 petals arranged in a cross pattern, and they have 6 stamens, which is characteristic of the flowers of Brassica family plants. Alright, so this next plant is one that's going to be pretty key in our recipe. I mean, not necessary, but it's going to make it really dank and heady. Is this guy. I call it wild onions. Some people call it wild garlic. It doesn't really matter, but it's an allium. At first glance, it might look a little bit like grass, but the difference is that it's a round stalk. And if you break one of these open, it's hollow inside. It's round and hollow inside, and it smells like garlic. So here I just pulled off the greens, but if you're really careful, you can also pull up the bulb. If you like get down in there and just pull it up gingerly. This one has a little bulb. And it's basically like a little onion or a little garlic. And you can eat the whole darn thing, you know. I'll clean off the dirt. I'll take those roots off. And it's garlic, and that's going to make the pesto taste really good. This stuff is really common in cities. I guess I should say that there could be some other members of the lily family that look similar, kind of similar to this, which could be poisonous. But for me, like, if it's got that distinctively garlicky smell, that's a pretty good tell. And it, you know, it kind of looks like grass, but it gets bigger than this also. It gets thicker and taller. But yeah, of course, make sure you're 100% sure what you're eating. So I pulled up a little clump here. So we got a bunch of little bulbs, and some of them broke off, so I just have the tops of them. And then we got a little grass in here mixed in, so you see the flat leaf of the grass. The grass has a flat leaf, the wild onions have a round hollow leaf. So I'll have to separate these out. Here's some slightly bigger ones. That one broke off. These 3 all broke off, but that's fine. So I'll just use the tops in that case. And then the bulbs, they'll regrow. At least they should. These ones are a little more solidly in there. Okay. Got the bulbs of these ones. Got a nice big clump here. Here's some really nice clumps of garlic mustard that I'm gonna pick. So this one's leaves are a little bigger on this one. There's a clump here, there's a clump over there, there's a clump there. Lush. Hey, check this out. It's a huge patch of watercress. And you can see that the leaves have a similar kind of shape as the that other cress that we picked. Stuff that I'm thinking was maybe pepper cress or something. But this is like grown in this kind of marshy area, and it's definitely watercress. And it has a real mild flavor. Really refreshing. No, there's a little kick in there too. It's got a little kick. But I'll get just a little bit of this. So here's another really good green called chickweed, and it grows in this dense mat, and you can just grab handfuls like that. It's really mild green. It's really tender. It goes through a few sprouting and flowering cycles each year, and right now at the moment it's in the cycle where it's kind of long and stringy and less leafy. So that's why I'm only getting a couple handfuls of it, because later on it'll be more lush and leafy. But it's a good addition, and sometimes I'll make pesto out of mainly just chickweed itself. Okay, so I've got one bag full of nettle greens and one bag that's a mixture of garlic mustard, watercress, that other cress that we picked, wild onions, and chickweed. So this will be a good batch of pesto, and like the exact ratio of these plants isn't all that important, and you know, the exact plants aren't important either. It's like you can learn what are the edible greens in your area, you know, the ones that are edible raw, and you know, make your own recipe out of that. But I like having kind of a mixture of a mild tasting green along with some of the spicier, pungent greens like the cress and the garlic mustard, and then we got also the wild garlic in there, or the wild onions, to add that allium kick. So yeah, it's time to go home and make the pesto. Hey, check it out, I'm in my kitchen. You've always wanted to see my house, right? Well, this is the part where I rinse all the greens really thoroughly to get off any dirt or any grit or any goose pea or anything like that. So now I'm just going to chop off the stringy root part of the wild onions. And I have a garlic mustard root here. I'm just chopping off the really stringy parts of that. So I've included some of these garlic mustard roots, and I cut off the stringy bits, and I cut out some of the really tough seeming bits. So hopefully these pieces can get blended up and add some of that horseradish kick to the pesto. Alright, so I got all my greens cleaned and prepped, and from this point you pretty much just make the pesto like you would ordinary basil pesto, but substituting the greens for the basil. If you don't have, you know, enough wild greens, you can always mix in some basil or some arugula or whatever. It doesn't have to be all wild. So in addition to the greens, we're going to use a lot of olive oil, some nuts. I have walnuts, almonds, and pepitas, but you really can use whatever kind of nuts you want. I got nutritional yeast, which is what I like to use instead of cheese, just because I don't eat a lot of dairy personally. I got some salt, and I personally like to put some lemon juice in there because it seems to stop it from oxidizing and turning brown. Putting some nettles. Ow. Oh yeah, about the nettles. Yeah, they still sting, but as soon as you cook nettles at all, the sting completely goes away. So usually people just steam them a little bit or blanch them, in some boiling water or put them on a skillet or something. And when I first started making nettle pesto, I would steam them just a little bit before I blended them up. But then I found that even if I just put them raw, it seems like just the blending, if I blend it thoroughly and, with all this other ingredients, it seems to take care of the sting, and I don't have any problem with the sting. If you're feeling nervous about the sting, then maybe just steam them just really briefly before you blend them up. Some of the other greens, some of the onions. Then we need kind of a lot of olive oil to get it to blend. I never measure anything exactly. I just kind of eyeball the proportions. But basically, a whole lot of greens, a generous dollop of olive oil, and less of the other stuff. Nutritional yeast, a little bit of salt. Hey, this is a piece of grass. Ooh. Ooh. Hell yeah. Check it out, we got 2 quarts out of all of that. And this stuff stores really well in the freezer too. And I'm baking a spaghetti squash to eat it with. It's gonna be super dank. There's 6 different wild plants in there. It's a really pleasant way to spend a few hours of the day. You don't have to exchange germs with anybody. You can be socially distanced. It's free. What more could you ask? But you do gotta learn your plants so that you know what you're picking, because there are poisonous plants out there. For the United States, there's a website, plants.usda.gov, that's a pretty comprehensive database of plants that has identification information and lots of pictures on there. Maybe there are similar websites for other countries, and you might be able to search and find a website that has a list of plants for your local region, like your state or whatever. There's all kinds of field guides. Here are 4 of my favorite foraging books. These 2, The Forager's Harvest and Nature's Garden by Sam Thayer, are really good. They go into real detail about specific plants. Botany in a Day by Thomas J. Elpel really familiarizes you with the characteristics of different plant families, and so you can learn to recognize what family a plant might be even if you've never seen that particular plant before, and then you can kind of infer some of its qualities and uses. And Identifying and Harvesting Edible and Medicinal Plants by Steve Brill. It's just a really easy to use book that'll help you identify and harvest and cook and eat a lot of plants. You can also talk to me through my Patreon account. You can, sign up for Patreon and you can ask me whatever you want. All right. It's weird times out there, but you can eat some dank food for free and have that extra level of satisfaction knowing that you got it without interacting with a vulnerable supply chain. And you can be super healthy. All right. Peace out, my internet friends.